podcast where we talk to smart people, but not necessarily done by smart people?
That is an awesome question.
This one goes down probably on one of my top 5.
Hey, I like nutrition. I like to eat food.
This is the coolest thing ever. We're going to do this forever.
I wish I paid more attention in that class.
You know, I'm going to be honest, I don't understand that. As a man, I don't get it.
Welcome to smartpeoplepodcast.com.
Hello and welcome to Smart People Podcast, conversations that satisfy your curious mind. Chris Stemp here, and thank you for tuning in. I'm really curious what you thought about the last 2 episodes that John and I did where we recorded by ourselves, released them kind of right back to back. Interested what you thought of that process. We've already seen a lot of emails come in talking about things they learned, things they hope we will do going forward. Really love to hear from you all. So thanks for sending that in. Let's get on to this week's episode. I'm excited to bring it to you because not only have we never covered it, but we have heard from you that this topic or these types of topics are relevant to you and needed. This week, we are speaking with Mary Beth Ferrante about the miracle workers that are working moms. You see, Mary Beth built her entire coaching practice around the difficulties that working moms have. What's it like to go back to work? What's it like to take time off? How do you negotiate higher salary? How do you make sure that you're not pigeonholed into this mom role and not taken seriously professionally? You know, this topic couldn't be more pertinent, especially to me right now. I have my 2.5-year-old and we have another one on the way, probably coming within the next 1 to 2 months. So I see what my wife goes through and getting up and doing your day and acting like everything's normal, even though everything in your body is changing. But not only that, what's it like to have to leave work? How are you judged? I'll just give you a clue on one insight that I had in this episode that I really never thought of. Mary Beth explains how when working moms go back into the workforce after having children, if they have young ones at home and they leave early to tend to those kids, sometimes they'll hear things like, well, why do you get to go home early? Oh, it's just your kids. Can't you deal with it some other way? But then in the same token, if those working moms stay late, they'll get the look or the comment or the behind the back talk that is, I wonder who's taking care of the kids. And just that is a microcosm of the difficulties of being a woman, being a mother, and working in today's environment. Mary Beth is a certified career coach with the International Coach Federation. She's trained in organizational, relationship, and system coaching, and she has chaired national women's organizations and been on the board of directors of the Junior League of Los Angeles. In her previous life, she was the SVP at a top Fortune 100 firm, and she got to see firsthand what it was like to make that transition from a striving, hardworking, powerful woman to a new mom trying to navigate the corporate environment. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary Beth. Hopefully you enjoy this episode. You can find more about her at her website, liveworklead.com. And please let us know what you think. We are at smartpeoplepodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out, and I hope you enjoy the show. All right. Well, Mary Beth, first, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time away from your 7-week-old and being on the show.
Thank you, Chris. I'm so happy to be here.
You know, as you have this business related to women at work and how they deal with being a mother and all of that, it must be on the ground analysis you get to do now that you have a 7-week-old and almost a 3-year-old.
Definitely. And it really is the driver for all of this, is becoming a working parent myself and really being in the reality of juggling both my career aspirations as well as, wanting to be that really good mom at home too.
Well, let's start here. Let's actually start with your story and the business that you have so we get a really solid understanding of who you are and how you got here. And then we'll jump into exactly what you do and some questions I have.
Fantastic. So my company, liveworklead.com, we're really committed to supporting working parents. And it really all stemmed from my own experience. So I returned to work after the birth of my first child. I was working for a Fortune 500 company. I was in a fairly senior leadership position. I was an SVP in business strategy. And I was working in a team of all men and really having a very different experience than they were having in their careers and managing their families. And so when I returned to work, it was all niceties in the beginning, but by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I had a full slate of projects. I was 100% considered back at work and was already feeling very overwhelmed, and it had been about 6 hours.
Wow.
So I knew that I needed, support, and that I needed to kind of think about how I was structuring, balancing this role as a mom and my role as a professional. And so I had reached out to a woman who was kind of on the outskirts of my team. She was on our kind of broader team, who was a mom, but she was a little bit older. Her kids were in middle school, high school age. And when I reached out to her to kind of just get advice and understanding, she said to me, "Oh, well, it just takes time. You'll get through it." And that was honestly like a dagger to my heart, which I know seems very dramatic, but when you are just kind of back in it and you have a newborn and you're not even sleeping, all you want is something real and tangible to be helpful in figuring out how to be a mom and how to be a career woman as well and be a professional at work. And that truly was the kind of idea behind Live, Work, Lead, was giving women support in that moment when you're transitioning to maternity leave, transitioning back from maternity leave, and really knowing how to figure out that first critical year back. Because if you don't and you are struggling, you're going to leave or you're going to take a step back in your career. And I know from me personally that I did not want to regret my career because of becoming a mom. And it was a little bit of an identity crisis, to be honest, of like, who am I as this professional and now as this mom? And how do I figure out who I am being both of those things?
Right. And the thing is, as a man, but also as a parent and soon to have my second as well, I went through a litany of emotions and feelings, but I struggle to understand, of course, what it is like for the mom, right? So I think there's so much similarity, but in reality, seeing it firsthand, there's so many differences. What is it that really sparked you to say, I need to focus on new moms, the women specifically, and help them deal with this balance between work and new role as a mother?
Well, I think there's just a different level of expectation. New dads, and let me tell you, I am glad that I am a parent in 2018 now, and that I have a supportive husband who wants to be all in and get his hands dirty with our kids and is not, that traditional dad that just comes home and puts his feet up and expects dinner to be ready back in the day, like in the 50s that we all saw on TV or whatever was happening back then. But I do think that there is a difference in bias that still happens. Women and moms are judged for being at work and for not being at work. They're judged for leaving early and for not leaving early, right? If you leave early, I can't believe you have to go pick up your kids and you're out the door at 5 o'clock while the rest of us are slaving away until 7 p.m. But if you're sitting along next to them till 7 p.m., wow, who's watching your kids? How are you raising your children? Is somebody else raising your children? Like, those are the questions that moms get that dads never get. And there's even in my husband's and I relationship, a really interesting kind of tidbit, which is there's an expectation with men that once you become a dad, that you're really all in on your career because you have a family to support. And my husband even briefly mentioned to his boss when he told him that I was pregnant with our second, that he was like, yeah, and just said in passing, yeah, I don't know how I'm gonna manage all the money of this, like how I'm going to fund our lives with now 2 kids and diapers and all the stuff that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
And his boss simply said, yeah, we should talk about that. We should really take a look at your salary, which to me is shocking that all he had to say was, I'm having another kid, nothing to do with his even professional life, for his boss to even say like, oh yeah, let's have that conversation.
Right.
Whereas that would never happen with a woman.
Hmm.
And, on average, women, actually moms, make $11,000 less than a man in a similar role.
I was having this conversation literally last night that before, and I'll openly admit this, before I was a parent, more so when I was younger and in that, I was working in finance, I was in that kind of corporate world, I saw it all the time. The women, I've got to leave, I've got to go pick up my kid, or I had to call in sick because my child was sick. And I remember not thinking, wow, how could you do that? I really didn't think that. I remember thinking, though, I mean, everybody has kids. Is it really that hard? I do. Yeah. Now, I was like 22, but I'm saying, thinking like, yeah, I get it, but the whole world is predicated on people having children. It can't be that hard. Can't we get this taken care of and get our work done? Then I had a kid and my mind was blown. Yeah.
But I think what you said, the whole world is predicated on having children, but the way that the US's work system was set up was based on the fact that someone is home raising the children.
Mm-hmm.
It is set up for a one working parent household, yet we live in a world where 63% of households have 2 working parents. And the reason that number is even so low is because there's so many single parents. So you have to think about the fact that at least, I think it's more like 78% of moms work. And so you're juggling this world where we're built for one person to really manage the household and manage the children and be able to, take care of them from at least until they're in school. And not that it ends at that point by any means, but that you're at least having them out of the house for a few hours at that point.
Mm-hmm.
We're not shifting our work environment to support the fact that the majority of households need 2 working parents.
Do you see that there's any change coming? Or is there a change happening as we speak?
I think there are glimmers of hope. We've got Time's Up right now, Me Too, these huge movements that are happening around women and equity, pay equity, experience equity, making sure that there are safe workplaces without harassment. But I think the other part of this conversation is supporting parenthood. And we have to be in a position where we are giving more flexibility and more maternity leave, paternity leave, both of them. I'm a big fan of both. And more access to childcare to allow us to really thrive as, working parents. We're still far, far behind other countries. It's actually unbelievable how poor the US is in terms of providing support from childcare and from paternity and maternity leave. And so I think those things have to happen as a nation for us to make a significant shift. But I do think that companies are starting to really raise the bar, right? Netflix has a year of maternity leave now. All of the big banks have moved from 8 weeks to most of them are now 16 weeks. I think the more and more access that we can give to people to have paid leave, the easier this becomes. But it's still a transition, and we still need to support both men and women, but particularly women as they're coming back into the workforce after having a child and making sure that they're not getting, quote unquote, mommy tracked and pushed out of those revenue generating roles or those creative roles for more of a support role where, they're not needing to be in front of the client or they're not needing to travel as much or whatever the case may be. And I think it's really important that we're making sure we're giving women the support that they need to make a choice, because it is okay if you want that for you, but also that we're allowing them the flexibility to stay in if they want to.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about maternity leave specifically, it's something that really does baffle me. My wife is a kindergarten teacher and gets zero paid days. Zero.
Yep.
Not a single paid day. Now, the law stipulates through, the Family Medical Leave Act that she is allowed to take, I believe it's, I don't know,
Probably
6 weeks and still have a job.
Yep.
But not
still
paid.
a job. Yeah, not paid. And that's, and that's only for companies that have 50 or more employees.
Wow.
So if you work for a small business or you work for a startup or you work for yourself or anything like that, you have no access to leave from the Family Medical Leave Act. And so, people are returning to work way too early. And, from a health perspective, it's a problem, but definitely from, a ability to do well and to feel good about doing well at your job and also support your infant. There's so many things that go into this, from being able to heal post having a baby.
Yeah.
By the way, that's not, always a simple thing.
Yeah.
And to be able to breastfeed and to be able to attach to your child. And so there's so many aspects from a health perspective, but then also just from a mental place of being able to go back to work and do well and feel good about being back to work.
Looking at it from the perspective of a startup, a small startup, maybe it's 10 people. And if they lose one member of their team, that's 10%, right? And so how do we navigate that? What is the benefit to the corporation to be more flexible or say, hey, go ahead and take 2, 3, 4, 6 months off and we're going to pay you? I'm just playing bad guy here, but if I'm starting a company, that seems like it's going to be a real hit to the sustainability of what I'm trying to build.
And it definitely is, I think, from a pure cost benefit in the moment. But if that person, if that mom or that woman is an exceptional talent, and usually in the startup world, you're only hiring exceptional talent, the process that you're going to have to go through to actually replace that person, the cost to find somebody else, anywhere from 25% of a salary to pay to replace them to 4 times a person's salary to pay to replace them.
Wow.
It is important to really look at it, I think, holistically as, do we want to be a place where we are going to be supporting our team members and supporting our employees and helping them grow? And I do think that you have to be pragmatic. And if you're walking into a startup and you're walking into employee or into a company of only 10 people and you are planning to have children in the near term future, you have to be open and having those conversations. And I think making sure that you're figuring out, can we bring somebody in part-time, or, is there a way for me to work flexibly? Can I work from home and work a few hours a day for a certain period of time?
Yeah.
The challenge, I think, is that we make assumptions that people can't do it. And so we either don't hire them or we, write them off, and we're not opening those conversations.
You transitioned from that corporate job into what you do now with Live, Work, Lead as a coach, working with women and men all across the country, I'm assuming, doing various coaching activities. How was that transition, given not only now are you leaving behind probably that, at least the cushy salary, but you're starting something new, you're launching a business, you have to learn. What was that transition like while also being a mom?
The transition was crazy. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
It had been something that I had been thinking about making a transition in my career for a number of years. And I think one of the key pieces to figuring out being a working parent and not feeling as guilty is loving your job and loving your career. And I didn't. It was one of those things where I was in a very cushy salary, to your point, and I was in a kind of niche team that had a lot of credibility, a lot of prestige, but I didn't love the work. And it was also crazy hours, a lot of weekends and a lot of, we need this in 6 hours. We need this in 24 hours, right? So it was all this immediacy that is very, very challenging as a parent. And so it was already in the back of my mind that I wanted to make a shift in my own career, and becoming a mom just really brought that right to the forefront. Because for me, if I was going to be away from my baby, I needed to really care about what I was doing. So I started actually coaching and doing trainings while still having my full-time job and having a 4-month-old.
Wow.
And so I, really had to figure out that kind of structure within my life and also get support. And I had to ask for help, which is something that I don't do well, to be honest. And I think a lot of us don't. I think there's an expectation that we're supposed to do it all on our own. And so I did have to ask for help and, bring kind of people into my life, get some daycare help and also get my husband to help more than I think he expected to in the beginning. And I did a lot of work at night. For better or worse, I sleep trained my child.
Yeah.
She had to be in bed so that I could work at night.
Wow.
And so that was a important aspect to this. And so I would work a lot at night and was doing kind of both for a while. And ultimately, I think, when I went to leave my corporate job, there were a couple things in play. One was, yes, I was in a cushy job and it was a decent salary, but the men on my team were still making 30% more than me. And every time I raised it and brought that to the forefront, I was kind of placated to and told that, oh, we're fixing it, we're working on it. But at the end of the day, the numbers were never coming back.
Wow.
And that was a huge driver for me to say, well, I'm going to leave. And then I think the real kicker is when I actually, made that decision and quit my job and talked to my boss and told him that I was going out on my own. He was like, oh, so you're going to go be a mom.
Wow.
And I was like, no.
But thanks for making this easy on me.
Easy. Yep, exactly. It was definitely a challenge. And I think it continues to be now having 2 kids and figuring out the juggle. But, I'm really mindful that it can't all be done in one day.
Right.
And that it take time. And, I tell all of my clients that you've got to focus on, 2 to 3 things that you're really going to accomplish in the day. And everything else is just extra icing on the cake. And I take that into my own life as well and figuring out how I'm going to, accomplish what I need to and know that it doesn't have to all happen, in the next 24 hours.
This week's episode is brought to you by Audible. Audiobooks are great for helping you be a better you, whether you want to feel healthier, get motivated, or learn something new. And with an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more, Audible has all the audio content you need to start your year on the right foot. With Audible, you can try books like Fire and Fury, Inside the Trump White House. I don't even know where to begin with this book. Fire and Fury is absolutely amazing, and it is a fantastic listen. I don't know if I can take it all at face value, but it is absolutely fascinating to get an inside look at the Trump White House by Michael Wolff. When you try out Audible, make sure Fire and Fury is one of the first books you download. Whether it's on your phone, through your car, from a tablet, or at home on an Amazon Echo, you can get through tons of books while doing almost anything. And Audible even lets you switch seamlessly between devices, picking up exactly where you left off. Listen, I'm sure you've heard of Audible, but now is an awesome time to try it out. Start a 30-day trial, and your first audiobook is free. Go to audible.com/smart or text SMART to 500-500. We've never had one of those before. How cool is that? Again, that's audible.com/smart or text SMART to 500-500 for a 30-day trial and free first audiobook. You can do it with audiobooks. And now back to the episode.
Let me ask you on that. Are you speaking specifically if you have your children at home with you, or is that something that you relate to anyone, any parent who is trying to accomplish things?
Yeah, definitely. And I will say that 100% I have childcare. Like there's no way.
I was going to say, I was really wondering. I was like, wait, you run a business with kids at home because you can't even have a phone call. You can't even go to the bathroom when you have, I'm assuming, 2 kids.
Exactly. So I definitely have childcare, and I think that is an important piece of any working parent to be able to, have that support, whether it's daycare or a nanny or an au pair, whatever. There's so many options out there. But I think really for any working parent, it's that expectation that it has to happen now, and, it just piles up and you're constantly in reaction mode. And this really happens, I think, a lot in corporate America where you're responding to things and you're not really being proactive. And so taking that control and trying to take that step back and really look at what is the priority, what are the top things that need to happen today, and what doesn't actually have to happen today, and also opening up conversations. I think one of the things that it really happens is we have this expectation that we have to get things done quickly. There's this level of immediacy in our world today, especially with technology and being able to respond 24 hours a day, is that we have to always give that response immediately, or we always have to turn that project around immediately. And so just even having a conversation with your team or with your boss about, okay, so when does this actually need to be done? And really understanding what the level of priority is. Because sometimes we don't do that and we just, kind of anticipate that it must be done when we really have a week or a few days. So.
That's one of the number one things we talk about in the time management workshops I do is understand the nature of the time and what's being asked, because it's very often not what you expected. One of the things I love having coaches on the show because you work with clients. This isn't just theoretical. And so for all the parents out there listening thinking, yeah, this sounds great, but I'm sure you've heard it. So I want to make this as real world as possible. And I want to put one out there and then maybe talk to you about what you hear most. But what do you advise when people say, this sounds great, but I have bills to pay. I now have more bills given the children. I don't love what I'm doing. How am I supposed to transition out of a job, take care of a new kid, be this powerful woman and all of the biases that are going on in the world? How do I navigate this? I'm sure that's why people actually hire you.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It is why people hire me. And it's also why we work with companies to do this too, is to go in and have a company that is supportive of this and to give women the time and the space to have these conversations. Because I do think there's this expectation that there is no more time for me and I have to, be giving that to my kids. But it really comes back to that thought process of being on the airplane, and you've got to put your oxygen mask on first before you put the oxygen mask on your child or the person that's sitting next to you. And I really do firmly believe that. So it is a half hour or an hour out of, every week or two where you are being thoughtful about how you're planning your time and how you are really structuring the work that needs to get done, both at home and at the office. And I think number one is the first place we really start with clients is understanding that mental load and your kind of quote unquote second shift, which is all the stuff that needs to happen when you walk in the house. You need to figure out first and foremost how to either better leverage your partner, how to outsource some of those items, how to figure out how to make it work for you, whether it's, having food delivered from Amazon Fresh so you don't have to grocery shop, or it's using a crock pot so you don't have to worry about dinner. There are little tweaks that you can make, especially to kind of that quote unquote second shift, that start to give you a little bit of breathing room. And once we have just a teensy bit of breathing room, you can start to think about what you really want in your career and how to have those conversations with your bosses and with your team to be able to be more flexible. I think the other thing that we really focus on, I would say the second biggest thing, is how to start asking for what you need at work and knowing also when to be quiet. So once you've had that conversation and you've said to your boss, like, look, I need to shift my work day, and I'm going to now work from 7:30 in the morning till 5:30 instead of 9 to 7 or whatever it is. Once you've had that conversation and they've agreed, you've gotten the green light, like, you need to stop having that conversation. So instead of every day at 5 o'clock saying, hey, I'm out of here in a half hour, what else do you need? You just leave at 5:30. You've already agreed to that. Right. And you don't want to keep drawing attention to it. And so really finding ways to address that second shift at home, and then to really start asking for what you need at work. And that creates a little bit more space in your life.
I really agree with and love the point you made about finding that little bit of space. It's actually something I have done in the past, some career coaching, specifically with young adults, even college students. My first thing is you have to just pause. You have to create space because your brain is working in the reactive portion and it can't think creatively and it can't imagine a future if you're always reacting, responding, fight or flight. And so I think as a parent and a working parent, you would say, yeah, but I can't make that space. And what you're saying is, first week, let's try and find 10 minutes. Second week, let's try and find 20. And over time, maybe you get to an hour where you get to consider what you want. Next, I wanted to uncover, have you helped women transition into those jobs that they like? Because as you mentioned, one of the hardest parts about being a new mom is if you have to leave something you love, i.e. your kid or kids, to go to something you really don't, that is going to amplify the struggle. So what if I don't like what I do? I'm a working parent. How do you navigate that transition? How do you help them find that next step professionally?
Yeah. And I think it's such an important piece to this because I do think that you have to love or at least strongly like what you do to be successful as a working parent and to really go after your own professional goals and not get derailed by the bias that's happening and not take that step back and off ramp or completely leave your job. So it's such an important conversation to have. And I think the first thing that we do is start to, once we've found that hour, to your point from earlier, take the time to really be thoughtful and strategic about the type of work that you want to be doing. I'm a firm believer that you have to play into your strengths and you have to really think about what your natural talents are and where you are going to thrive easily. I think we have this notion that work has to be hard. I don't know if you've ever heard that from your parents growing up, but I always did that, it's called work for a reason.
It's a 4-letter word. Come on, we know that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think, if you're in a place where you're utilizing your strengths and the talents that you have and you enjoy doing it, you're going to do well much easier and it's going to feel much more natural. So the first thing that I do with my clients is really start to look at what are the things that you really enjoy doing? What gives you energy? What lights you up? Where do you feel like, oh my gosh, how did 5 hours fly by? I felt like that was 10 minutes because you're so into what you're doing. And for some people, that's really easy. And for some people, it takes a little bit of time for us to figure out what those things are. But once we understand what your strengths are, what your talents are, what you really love to do, then it's about being really strategic about how do we pivot you into that type of work. And that really gets into kind of a quote unquote traditional job hunt of rebranding yourself, making sure that you're pitching yourself correctly, that you're talking about your experience and your talents in a way that is going to pivot you into the role that you want. That you're not just thinking about your resume as a list of all the things you've done, but is really a way to market yourself into what you want to do. How do we really rephrase things, reformat the work that you love and bring that to the forefront? I think a lot of times people just list all the tasks that they've done. I think the other thing is looking at it from a confidence perspective too. A lot of women particularly struggle with imposter syndrome. And so there's this thought that they can't make a move or that no one will, find them credible. And so really looking at confidence and ways that you can change your body language and start to act in the way that you want to be seen, dress the part, start to do the work, volunteer, whatever it is, to start to do the type of work that's, more in your strengths, the more you're going to feel at ease with it. And then, it's about putting yourself in the right conversations. A job hunt is time consuming and it's difficult, but if you're strategic and you're really thoughtful about who you're talking to and how you're talking about yourself and really making sure that you're pitching yourself in a way that's going to help people help you. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing is that people talk about, oh, I just hate what I do, but I don't really know what I want to do. And people don't know how to help you in that situation. But if you're very intentional and you say, I really am looking to make a move into more of a strategic role in digital marketing, well, that's much more specific. And so you can start to have conversations with people around exactly the type of work that you want to be doing.
How do you recommend women handle the stress, the guilt? And by the way, not just women, but men. How do we all handle that after we bring a new life into the world and something genetically changes to where we just want to take care of them and shield them? Now we're thrust back into this really 10 hours at a minimum, usually from commute to end. How do we handle that?
I think number one is planning. I mean, you have to be really thoughtful about your day. It's important to kind of map out like what would ideally happen, right? Who's taking care of my child? How am I getting to work? How am I, getting them out the door in the morning if they're going to daycare, transitioning them to a daycare provider in your home? Thinking through what might change at work and the conversations that you need to have before you go back, right? So a lot of the work that I do with my clients is while they're on maternity leave and they're planning to come back to work. And so we're really going through those specific things around daycare, around flexibility that you might need at work, what you need to ask for at work. Are you breastfeeding? Are you not? How does that play into your day? And really understanding all of the things that they need first so that they can start to plan for them and ask for them. And so then you have mapped out what would ideally happen. Now, let's be honest, 98% of the time, nothing ever goes according to plan, especially with kids, right? But if you have a plan of attack and you've got the diaper bag ready at the door and you know that when you get up in the morning, you're going to immediately get dressed and then you're going to go into the baby's room and get the baby dressed and you're, going to be, you're taking the morning shift and maybe your partner's picking them up at the end of the day. You've got to have that plan in place or it's all going to go awry. So I think being really strategic about the how you're actually going to do it. And then having a backup plan. When the baby gets sick, what do you need to do? A lot of companies, especially bigger companies, do offer some sort of like backup care, but you have to have had your doctor's notes submitted to the backup care, and you have to make sure that all their vaccines are up to date. So even planning before it happens, how you're going to handle something when, your kids get sick or your daycare provider doesn't show up or you need that backup plan. So being really thoughtful about that as well. And then I think I kind of mentioned this before, but this idea of the second shift at home and that mothers really end up holding the brunt of that, whether it's prepping for dinner and bedtime and keeping your house clean or not clean. And as my case is, let me tell you, my house is definitely a mess at all times. I think really making sure that you're not just planning for your workday, but you're also planning for when you get home and figuring out how you can split responsibilities and split them entirely. And what I mean by that is if you're going to split, if you're in a situation where you have a partner, first of all, because I think that's important to realize that some people just don't, and that's a whole other ball game.
Which, by the way, those of you out there who don't, you're honestly superheroes.
Yeah.
You just are.
100%.
So, yeah.
Yes, completely agree. But for those of you that have that partner, I think when you're planning through, okay, we're going to split up responsibilities, it's also the whole piece of it. So if I'm going to be responsible for grocery shopping, then I'm also responsible for figuring out what we need. If you're going to be responsible for doing all of the doctor's appointment scheduling and, managing the calendars, you need to be the one thinking about when are the signups, when is the next thing that I need to be putting on the calendar? How do I follow up with the doctor? Because I think what happens a lot of times is that you have one person in the household who is responsible for the thought planning and the strategy of the house, and then you're only splitting up the execution. And if you think about it from a work perspective, there's somebody who's in charge of strategy, and then there's somebody else who's in charge of execution.
Okay, I gotta cut you off here because what you said just hurts because I'm in my head, I'm giving myself a high five. I'm like, oh my gosh, I do so much work at home. I'm such a good dad. But, and I know this internally, but yeah. I am terrible with the strategy part. When are we do? I just don't like planning. It's one of the reasons I married my wife. She's amazing at this. But when are we doing this? Who's watching? And what's the food? Let's think about what are we going to have for dinner. I always just say, you know what? You just think about it. Tell me, and I'll do it. But the strategy portion, in my opinion, is actually more difficult than the doing.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you're doing 100% of the doing, then you guys
Sure.
have got it made,
Sure.
right?
But
most
I'm
of
not.
the time, that's not the case.
No.
Exactly. So, you've got to be thinking about how do you split it up, either that one person is always doing the planning and one person's doing the execution, or how do you really take full ownership of something?
Well, Mary Beth, I know you've got to hop and get on another call, but I really appreciate it. I think it's a subject that is hopefully gaining some coverage and some popularity because it is something that previously has not been properly vetted and talked about.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing it to the forefront. liveworklead.com is your website. What else would you like to tell our listeners where they can find you, how they might work with you if this is something they're struggling with?
Yeah, definitely. So we have a few different programs out there. So I would encourage all of you to head over to our website, liveworklead.com. I have a 10-step guide to figuring out how to get more time with your baby. So start there, of course. We do one-on-one coaching. We also have a working moms, quote unquote, mommy and me, or not so mommy and me, that is a virtual support program where you can, connect with other moms, have that conversation both around career and about being a new mom. It's kind of part career coaching, part mommy and me. And it's a really great way to connect with people and gain that community that I think we often lack as working moms because we're not able to make it to that music class or to that, mommy and me class at 10 a.m. on a Thursday. Mm-hmm. So those are the two kind of best ways to work with us. Also we do work with companies. So, if you're an HR professional or you want your company to get interested in working with us, we do trainings and workshops, and we also bring all of our coaching and programs into in-house at companies as well.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. It was great to talk to you.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Mary Beth Ferrante. Mary Beth's work can be found at liveworklead.com. Again, that's liveworklead.com. As always, thank you so much for downloading the show. If you enjoyed the show, one favor to ask of you, please head over to iTunes or Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review over there. It definitely helps out the show, and Chris and I greatly appreciate seeing those reviews on there, not only as affirmation, but it is a fantastic place to get feedback. And if you'd ever like to give us additional feedback or just reach out to the show, you can email us at smartpeoplepodcast@gmail.com or message us on Twitter @smartpeoplepod. All right, that's it for us this week. Please make sure you stay tuned. Head over to smartpeoplepodcast.com and sign up for the newsletter. And we've got some great interviews coming up. So we will see you all next episode.